Pedals are a mountain biking essential. And whether you're riding clips or flats, here's some tips, tricks and hacks. Actually, here's 7. Woo! Pedals make a modern mountain bike. Well, actually, now I think of it, they kind of make any modern bike, don't they? Because otherwise we're just going to be on a balance bike. The key, though, is how they see the trail. It's very, very different from pretty much any component on a bike. And thus, how we set these pedals up to get the most out of them for traction and control, well, and ergonomics, is going to be important and different. How we get the maximum control and maximum support out of pedals really matters. You might be thinking, well, does it really? Well, it does, because they take a lot of our weight. Just some simple trail-side maths means that, well, if we're sat down, they're going to have 1/3 of our weight, because we've got 1/3 on our bars, 1/3 on the saddle, and then the other 1/3 of our mass is going to be on the pedals. But if we stand up, well, then we've got pretty much half going through our pedals. And if you decide to get a little bit Sam Hill in a corner and drift a foot out on the inside of an apex, well, that means you've got half your weight and therefore lots of control going through just one pedal. So that grip, that support, that really matters. And that weight on the pedals matters a lot because it changes the weight distribution of our bike. So if you're trying to pull a wheelie, for example, we need a sudden rearward motion to get that front wheel up. And if we're trying to do an endo, you need that kind of balance between just getting onto the front wheel and rolling through. But all the time we're riding, we're having to balance where the weight is on the bike. Because sometimes it's so subtle we don't really notice. But you'll be dropping your heels in certain sections. You'll be trying to pull the bike through, or even try and pull up if you're trying to do a bunny hop. There's lots of subtleties. And also we've got this sort of front to back weight distribution as well. So if you're climbing, you're going to try and edge forward to keep the front wheel down. And if you're descending, well, actually you might try and load the front wheel up as well. But there's going to be a rearward shift, a frontward shift, and all those inputs, well, they're going through here. They're going through the pedals. So it really matters how we set them up. Okay, we've got flats here, but the setup is equally as important. We've got clip-ins. And besides the control, besides the support, the other issue is if you don't have your pedals set up correctly, well, that interface between a slipped pedal and your shin is like nothing other. The only thing I think that comes close is a barefoot on a Lego brick. It really hurts. Oh well, somebody else has met the pain of a slipped pedal. Sad times. Before we dive into any clip tips, first we need to talk about the weird name, as often these pedals are called clipless, yet you clip into them. Okay, we'll travel back into the mists of time, and early mountain bikers used hand-me-down roadie products, and one of the roadie products for peak optimization of pedal performance was the toe clip and strap. So it's kind of like a weird metal or plastic bit on the front of the pedal, and you slammed your foot in, and then as you were sort of balancing and pedaling, you then tightened up the strap for, yeah, optimized ergonomics. They sound like a faff, and they were a massive faff off-road. They were a real nightmare. Then, soon to be humongous powerhouse brand Shimano developed the SPD, Shimano Pedaling Dynamics for little fans out there. And effectively that was a miniaturized version of a road clip-in pedal. And they were called clipless because we didn't have this toe clip attaching to the front of the pedal. So moving forward, on this channel we're going to refer to them as clip-in pedals. Right, here's some tips. Clips can be really good, but lots of different pedal systems and shoe systems are subtly different. Yes, pretty much all of them share the twin paired cleat slot in the bottom of the shoe, but where that cleat slot is different. So gravity shoes, it's going to be further back because it's all about control. And then with cross-country and cross-country race shoes, it can be more under the ball of your foot. And the other thing is how these different shoes interact with the different pedals is going to be different. And you need to spend a little time and check that there's enough clearance, because with some brands, there isn't quite enough clearance to actually run the pedals as you might want. So you might have to double check. If you clip the pedal in and look, see around the sides of the cleat track and check there's enough space. You might have to get crafty with a knife just to make sure there's enough clearance. Some pedal systems like HT and Shimano use the cleat to transfer power. So that means that all load goes through that cleat. So the pedal body doesn't really do that much. Even if you've got really flexible shoes, it's the cleat that is the key of power transfer. And often with these pedal systems, they have a spring mechanism. It's often on the rear and they'll have adjustable spring tension. And that means you can play around with this tension. It's well worth doing. So with a really low spring tension, it means that, well, you can clip in much easier. You can also unclip very easily. But on really rough terrain, there's a risk that you could accidentally unclip. Why? Well, if you're dropping your heels, that means that you're riding on this spring latch, and if you hit something unexpectedly, well, you can easily overcome this sort of spring latch and then pop out. So the opposite end of the spectrum with these adjustable spring tension is to run loads of spring tension. That means that it's really tight. It's really hard to clip in. There's a lot of force required to clip in. There's also a lot of force required to unclip. So there's pros and cons to both. If you're riding in rocky terrain and you need to feel that secure feeling, then lots of spring tension can help. If you're newer to these style of pedals, well, lower can help. Crank Brothers pedal works differently, and that means that, well, these twin bars, that's where the load for the cleat is, but the power transfer from your shoe sits on these pads here. So it means that you've got to get, well, everything in the right place to make sure that it works really well. It sounds challenging, and well, it can be, but Crank Brothers makes a little tool just like this, and it works to set the cleats up in different shoes and make sure that you've got the right combination of shims to make it work perfectly. It's really handy because if you haven't got the cleat quite at the right height, well, your shoe can rock from side to side, and that means that the sole around the cleat will press down on these bars and open them up a little bit, which means you won't have a consistent feel. Conversely, if your tread lugs come in contact with this before the cleat can get to these bars, means it's going to be really hard to clip in, and well, it just won't feel as good as it should. But with a clever setup with this and some shims or different traction pads, you can have a fantastic pedal. So setting up the cleats is an extra step, and it is an extra step before you hit the trails, but I think it will result in you not actually hitting the trails, so it's time well spent. My next tip for clip-in pedal users is to explore all the options of different cleats. You might be wondering, what are different cleats and what do they do? Well, we'll explain. Lots of brands now do them. Crank Brothers, for example, have got 4 different models. HT have got 5. Even Shimano has got at least 2 different types. And what they do in terms of the different options is allow you to play with a little bit more float and potentially a different release angle. Now, float and release angle, they're 2 different things. With some pedal systems, they overlap very closely, so it's difficult to see that there's a difference. Float and release angle. Okay, we'll do float first. This one is the sort of free motion that your shoe has and foot has before any of the mechanisms engage to help you release. So with some systems, that float is quite a lot. With Crank Brothers and with Time, it's around 6 degrees. So think of it this way, it's 3 degrees in either direction. Now with other systems, as soon as you start to find the limitations of that float, you go straight into the release angle, and often the systems pop you out almost straight away, especially if they've got really high spring tension, because they need that release to pop you out, otherwise you wouldn't be able to overcome the spring tension. Other designs, a bit like Time and a bit like Crank Brothers, they work differently, and that means that the release angle is quite far away from that float, and that means that, well, you can play around with it. And playing around with them can really help find the fit and feel that you need. If you are struggling to clip out of your clipless pedals, it's well worth looking at different cleat options. With Crank Brothers alone, you can move from a 15-degree release angle to a 10-degree release angle on their easy release, and that will make a noticeable difference. So if you're looking for that final tweak and you've checked all the other tips that we talked about, that's the shoe interface, making sure that the cleat is in the right place for you, well, checking the cleats are right for how you ride is the last and final tip. If you're part of the clique of mountain biking that thinks that clips are for kooks, well, don't worry, we've still got a mountain of tips and tricks for those with flat pedals. And, well, it's quite good really, we don't have to ramble on as to why they're called flat pedals, because, well, they're a flat shape. It's pretty simple, isn't it? And the shape and performance of the pedals that we now have is amazing. It's moved on so much since the early iterations that I had to deal with. I'm a really big fan of flats, and they can be really awesome. And here's some little tricks and tips that will really help optimize them for you. First bit of advice, so it's not really a pedal tip, is get some proper flat shoes. The soles, even on these mid-level shoes, is so good. We've got tacky rubber, we've also got a really good profile, and we've got lots of negative spaces here where pins can fit. The traction on these is really impressive. And opposed to having to wander around and try and find a skate shoe or a random sort of hiking shoe that works, which is what I used to do early on. I am that old. Mountain bike shoes for flats didn't really exist. Well, now you can just get them off the shelf, and they've got loads of other performance tweaks, like a little raised inside section here to protect your ankle. Nice detail. One thing that's evolved since my very early days on not very good flat pedals is that now lots of brands have got different size options. Crank Brothers have got two. They've got a small and they've got a large. And this is my first tip, is make sure that you pick the right size. You might think, well, that's fine, I've got relatively big feet. You might do, but these big pedals are really actually, well, like an XL. They're huge. And the stock small of many brands actually converts to a sort of larger pedal back in the day. And making sure that you've got the right pedal platform to fit your feet on makes a big difference. Because if you've got this really big area, it can be, if you've got big feet, really supportive. That can be a good thing. But if you've not got massive shoes to slap on here, it means you're spreading out all of your weight over a really large surface area, and that means you're not getting as much bite on the pins. So make sure that you pick the right size. And for me, if you're on the cusp between the two sizes, if you go for the smaller one, because you're more likely to get more grip and you're more likely to, well, not hit stuff on the trail. Again, we talked about how low a pedal can be on the trail. My next tip is how the pedal generates its grip. Gone are the cages of old, we're relying on little pins to get biting traction. A bit like a stiletto shoe on a hard wooden floor. Actually, less pins can equal more grip. So what I often do, if I want to try and boost grip with my Crank Brothers pedals, is actually remove the inside pins. It actually boosts the sort of concave shape, so it feels nicer, and I'm also reducing the number of pins on the pedal, so I actually get more traction. It's a good, simple step to get more grip. As well as removing some of the pins, you can play around with the height of the stock pins. Think of it like a bed of nails versus, well, just a single nail, or a bit like that Lego brick. If you stand on lots of Lego bricks, it's okay, but if you just stand on a 2x1 brick, it really hurts. If you've tried the missing pin trick to boost traction, but you're still wanting more traction and more grip from your pedals, well, lots of brands do upgrade kits for bigger pins. And I should flag that, well, bigger pins mean that they can bite in not just to your shoe, but into your shin as well. So please be very careful. You can go really wild. Crank Brothers offers 8 and 10 mil pins, so you can set your pedal up to be truly fearsome. I mean, the traction that you'd get off this is just, well, mind-blowing. So play carefully and think about where you want the extra traction, where the extra grip will be needed. Probably on that front edge and this rear edge here. And make sure that the pedal is symmetrical. You'll get enough in the pack to get them set up right. As some of you may know, I used to be a workshop mechanic and a race mechanic too. So my last tip, whether you're on clips or you're on flats, well, service your pedals. Pedals that are spinning on nice fresh bearings and have got lovely grease in them are going to work loads better, whether you're clipping in or bombing around on flats. So service your pedals, it really helps. Hopefully, this little selection of tips has really helped you for that one contact point for your foot. Well, hopefully it's your one contact point. So, if you like the mountain of racers that are clipped in, or you're wanting to try and get rad like Morgan Shah or Sam Hill and rock the flats, well, hopefully this will help. Now, one little favour I've got to ask. If you've enjoyed this video, well, just click the like, and if you haven't already, do subscribe. It makes a real difference. Finally, what are you on? Flats or clip-ins? Let me know.